Nora Speaks is a weekly podcast that tugs at the soul and consciousness of the Black community. With show topics such as youth empowerment, education, women's impact, and civic engagement, Nora Speaks challenges the listener to not only join the movement, but be the movement. On the show, you'll learn from insightful guests who have demonstrated capacity in these fields and more, and I'm your host, Nora Muhammad. Welcome to the show. Welcome to episode 185 of the Nora Speaks podcast, and I am your host, Nora Muhammad. I want to thank you for joining me in this episode and for joining me in previous episodes. I'm very grateful to you for your support. I'm grateful to you who have subscribed to the Nora Speaks podcast. And if you are not a subscriber, I encourage you to subscribe to the Nora Speaks podcast. Become a frequent listener, and when you subscribe, you will receive notifications directly to your smart device, letting you know that another episode of the podcast is available for you to listen to. I am so grateful to be back with you for another episode of the podcast, where it is my hope today, and it is my hope for every single episode that I have shared with you, that it reaches your heart and your mind, and it has the intended effect, which is to cause us to think, to cause us to consider that which we may not have considered. I want this podcast to encourage us to reflect on the condition of our community, which means we're looking at our families, we're looking at ourselves, we're looking at our communities, and we're looking at ourselves as a whole in this nation of America, and considering whether the condition that we are witnessing is positive or if it's in need of some support, some help and repair. And I believe that our community, the Black community, is in serious need, in dire need of an awakening. I believe that the Black community is in need of a revitalization, not just physically in urban centers, but also mentally and morally and spiritually. We are just experiencing terrible suffering. We're experiencing terrible and horrendous trauma. Our educational outcomes aren't what we would like them to be. Our political outcomes aren't what we need them to be. Our families are broken. Our hearts are broken. And I believe that we have the capacity and the ability within us to restore our community, but that is going to come with a shift in our thinking. That's going to come with a shift in our behaviors, because the outcomes that we are looking for are so far from what we are experiencing today. So again, thank you for joining me, and I hope that this podcast has value to you, so much value, that not only do you come back and listen week after week, that you also share this podcast on your social media accounts and also with your friends and family who you think could benefit from what is shared on the podcast. In episode 185, I'm going to talk about giving a little. We should give a little. And I believe in the spirit of service. I was raised in the spirit of service, and I have to say that I'm so grateful for the way in which I was raised and brought up. And my family often was helping someone, either professionally through the occupations or just, after work and on the weekends. I can recall as a little girl going with my aunt who would go and care for a man. And I remember his name was Mr. Peoples. And on Saturday mornings, we would go to his home, and my aunt would clean his home. She would bathe him. She would help him with meals for the week. And he was a friend of her father's, my great grandfather. And I remember it was just routine that we would go over there, and she would take care of Mr. Peoples. And Mr. Peoples was he lived alone. It appeared that he didn't have any family. And I would just watch her and help in any way that I could. And I just watched her taking care of him. I can recall my grandmother doing the same. I can recall my great grandfather going and as he said, he would go look after the old people and being old himself, but he would go drop off their Sunday papers and just help in any way that he could. And so the spirit of service and doing for others, it was kind of bred into me, if you will. My professional occupation is one of service. And what I do outside of work, outside of my quote professional capacity, what I do in the community, I operate in the spirit of service, and I have been trying to instill that in my children because I think it's just so important that we make a contribution with what we can and with what we have and from where we are. And so this episode is titled Give a Little. And what I mean by that is contribute to more than just your own goals and dreams, to your own personal success. Contribute something to the community or expand the contribution that you're making to others. And I've heard our people use the phrase that I'm taking care of mine. And that generally means that person is not so much interested in the affairs of others, but that person is looking after their own selves and those within that individual's household. And we want you to take care of yourself and take care of yours. However, we have to be intelligent and understand that if we are not contributing to the environment that our children, our families are operating in, are navigating through, if we're not going to make a contribution, then we're not exactly taking care of minds, taking care of yours, because our children have to walk to school, right? We want to make sure that the community is safe. Our children have to walk to school with peers. We want to make sure that the peers that they're going to school with, walking to school with, engaging in extracurricular activities are well, are stable, and are healthy. Because if they are dealing with insecurity, if they're dealing with lack, if they're dealing with trauma and stress, then the impacts of that trauma, that stress, that hardship is going to affect yours. It is going to affect mine. It can happen in the way of you coming outside and your car isn't there anymore. It could occur in an unfortunate bystander injury from gun violence. So we must consider that when we're taking care of our own, that means that we're contributing in some way to the environment in which that they have to navigate through. And there are many, many ways that we can support, that we can give, and that we can contribute to our communities. Some of us contribute as mentors, as coaches, as teachers, right? So not only are you engaged in a paid profession and occupation, but the nature of your occupation is help, is service, a guidance counselor, a mental health counselor, a substance abuse counselor, right? There are some social workers. There are some jobs and occupations by nature of that work that you are supporting and contributing to others, and you're earning a living while you're doing so. We can support through volunteer activities, giving of our time to support others who need our support. That's being an unpaid assistant coach, right? That's being a volunteer at a community health center, at a substance abuse counseling center, at a mentor program, just coming in and being present and giving your time voluntarily without expectation of any kind of financial compensation. And if, some of us, you may say, well, dealing with children is just not my thing. Dealing with people. Some people are not people persons, and maybe they're uncomfortable dealing with people directly, or they're not qualified to deal with, youth or adolescents. But you can still contribute your skill set, right? So if the community center, the rec center needs some work done, and you can bring your carpentry skills, you can bring your electrician skills, You can do some repairs and improvements at that center. You can clean up debris outside of a school, outside of a center, outside of in your neighborhood, outside of your own home, right? There's various ways that we can make a contribution, and we really left without any excuse, because your giving can look all kinds of ways. But what it is and what we need is for each of us to do something, engage in some kind of activity that's going to benefit more than just ourselves. It's going to benefit more than just our households. For some, you can contribute by making sure the corridors that our children use to get to and from school, to and from recreational activities, to and from extracurricular activities, you can make sure that's safe, right? You can do patrols. You can be present. You can keep an eye out and report any kind of hazards or dangers, or just having a presence of someone who gives a darn can be a deterrent to those who have ill intent and mischief in their own hearts and minds for our children. Because every time school is letting out, then you're there just to observe, just to make sure that your children or the community's children can get to and from where they need to get to unaccosted, unmolested, unbothered by those who are a negative element in our communities. For some, your story. You can contribute your story. You can contribute your story by submitting something to your local newspaper. You can contribute by speaking at a school. You can contribute by speaking in front of adolescent groups. You can contribute by going and being a volunteer at a detention center and maybe sharing your story. Some of us have stories that we can tell about our own lives, our families, that show that although we may come from unfortunate circumstances, we can turn those circumstances around with discipline, with diligence, and with faith and love. And we can talk about how those in our communities have helped us. And, you know, that the idea of despair, of despondency, and feeling like there is not the option or possibility to change, that can create real desolation in the hearts and souls of our young people. However, if you're someone who has a remarkable story as an overcomer, as an overachiever, when the odds were against you, you have an incredible story to tell. You can contribute that story to inspire others. You can go to the local school for career day. I've done that and spoke to students, and it's really kind of cool, kind of exciting to be able to talk to young people and answer their questions about what's going to come and what can come after they finish this part of their education. So there's so many different opportunities. Another is sharing your network. You can share your network with people who are doing good so that they themselves and their organizations can expand the impact that they're having. So if you know some folks in your own personal network or your professional network that you believe could make a meaningful contribution to an organization, link them up. Don't just hoard that and keep that for yourself when it could be useful to help others. So share that information. We can join boards, join committees, and join organizations. You know, there are groups, committees and councils that are actively making plans for communities, actively making plans for parks, making plans in the education and the curriculum for our young people. And perhaps there's a board or a committee that your knowledge and your expertise could be meaningful to. So maybe you can think about that in joining a board, not because you want to be a politician, but because you're a community member and you're investing and invested in your community. So another way that you can give, but just in general, survey yourself. Survey your home. Do you have clothes that you could give away, appliances that you can give away and donate to those who may need them? We all have something that we can give. Just give a little. So just as a brief recap, we can support individuals by mentoring individuals, counseling, or we can broaden that by supporting organizations that are helping others. So it doesn't just have to be you as a one-on-one, but you can contribute to an organization. Do it from your own circumstance. Do it from the place in which you occupy. And if you think about what it is that you're good at doing, then maybe that's the place of impact where you'll be most efficient. And, giving and charity, that's just a principle of life. And it's a principle that's valued by many religions and philosophies. The principle of charity, the spirit of giving. Companies do it, corporations do it, because they too recognize how beneficial it is. In Islam, charity is a principle. It's something that we are urged to engage in. And there's a verse from the Holy Quran that I think speaks very well to that. And it says, surely Allah, God, surely Allah wrongs not the weight of an atom. If it is a good deed, he multiplies it and gives from himself a great reward. So whatever it is that we give, it is multiplied. Now, I know for some, in speaking with our people, we can develop a selfish mentality. Maybe the circumstances that we have achieved through have been very, very difficult. Maybe people and life has been very hard on us, and our hearts become hardened, and that happens. Or we're just uninterested in others. And so some of us may have a selfish mentality. Some of us may have that because of an insecurity that we have in our hearts and minds, in thinking that if we give, what we give is gone forever, right? So if I donate money, well, then that's money that's gone that I'll never get back. But I got to tell you, there is something that's very unique about giving, about charity. I would never say give because something will be returned to you. But what I'm saying is give and something will be returned to you, especially if you're doing it with a pure heart. You're not doing it to be seen of men. I spoke before about an individual who recorded himself giving roses to women in a community that he identified as prostitutes. And I just thought, okay, so you're just going to drive in a car and you're going to film yourself giving roses to women who you think are prostitutes because I guess you want to make them feel better. And I thought, God forbid, it's just a woman walking home from work, walking from, getting some groceries for her family, but you're going to record yourself. And what purpose? And sometimes we harm the good that we do by our ego or our own self-interest. However, if we are giving with the spirit of love because we just want to contribute and make an impact, then I am telling you that which we give is returned to us. And it may not be returned in the same way in which we gave if we're giving our time, our money, our resources, making donations, that you're going to get that exact thing in return. I'm not saying that, but there is some kind of science behind it. I've experienced it. Others have experienced it who do good. There's a term called altruism, and it's, doing good for others without the expectation or desire for something to come back. However, even doing good for others, it improves our self-esteem. It improves our confidence. It unburdens us. It lightens our load. So even if you're giving something financially and the return to you is a beautiful spirit, is a beautiful countenance, is reduced stress, it's the satisfaction that you receive because you're helping others. It's the satisfaction when you can see a young person develop their own confidence or the skill that you're trying to teach them. When you give, that what you give is returned to you and it is multiplied. And you may be surprised what opens up when we open up our hands and give to others. Something is put back in our hands. So just do some good and give a little. I want to thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Nora Speaks podcast. As always, I encourage you to subscribe. I encourage you to share. I encourage you to contact me at nora@noraspeaks.com. Let me know what you think about this episode, others, the podcast in general, or if there are guests or topics that you would like to hear from. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, stay in peace. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Nora Speaks podcast. Be on the lookout for a new episode coming at you fresh next week. And as always, if you want to learn more about me and the work that I do, visit my website, noramahammed.com. Or if you have a listener question, email me at info@noraspeaks.com. You can also follow the Nora Speaks podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Nora Speaks Podcast. I'll be sure to include links in the show notes. If this show has value to you, please subscribe, rate, and review, and share it with family and friends. And be sure to check out previous episodes. And remember, don't just join the movement, be the movement. Stay in peace.